Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I hope that everybody has had a wonderful Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And I must begin by uh, telling my sorors of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated happy Founders Day. And 116 years of this wonderful sisterhood that provides service to all mankind. It's such an honor to have been a part of our amazing sisterhood for going on 37 years now. It's been a long time. But I just wanted to say happy Founders Day to the ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and I hope that everybody has had a beautiful day. So I know that what we usually talk about on Mind the Mental Monday, this might be a somewhat unusual topic. Um, talking about minding the mental while fighting the power. But I think that it's important for us to understand that in the many hundreds of years, literally, that African Americans or in this country have since we've been here since 1619, right, when the first um, enslaved Africans were brought to the shores of America. We have been traumatized collectively, as a people. But even through all of the trauma that we have experienced as a people, we also um, have experienced some really positive things that have happened. Um, I'm sorry. I am getting a message that we're not showing on Facebook. So let me see what's okay. Okay, I think that somebody was just having an issue with their instrument. So it looks like we are on my side it's saying that it's going live on Facebook. Sometimes we have these technical issues, but we will get through them. All right. So, as I was saying, as a people, we have suffered collective trauma since being brought to these shores. But in the midst of it, as a people, we have been able to build schools and advocate for our rights, obtain our rights as citizens of these United States of America. It is a country that has been built on the backs of our people, literally. And so, we have as much of a claim and a stake here as anybody else that has come here. And so, given that this is Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, literal birthday and holiday, I thought that it would be wonderful for us to talk about. Um, it would be wonderful for us to talk about um, Reverend Dr. King's legacy and to also just pay homage to him tonight. So I have a special guest here with me, and many of you will recognize him and remember him. He is my husband, the Reverend Dr. Wayne Weathers. and he is a social justice activist in the city of Philadelphia, and he has a lot of information, a wealth of knowledge about Dr. King. And so I want to welcome him here with us tonight. Um, and if you can maybe mute one of your, maybe mute your computer. I'm hearing an echo, so, and just talk through your phone through the IG. Yes. Don't mute your microphone on Zoom. Just mute your computer, the actual computer, so that you're
All right, my computer mic is muted. All right. Can they hear me on Zoom?
yes. Yes, I can hear you.
All right.
Can you hear? Okay, we're good.
Okay. Yeah, learn something
All
new.
right. So we're getting gotten.
Yeah, I didn't know you can mute your computer mic and still be heard on Zoom. So wow, learn something today. Hey, what's going on, babe?
Yes. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah.
It is Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday and holiday. It is Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated Founders Day. So it's a beautiful day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining me here tonight. I was trying to think of, who can I, get here with me who is knowledgeable about Reverend Dr. King and who has been doing this social justice work. And I said, that guy that I live with, might be a good choice. That Sigma guy that I live with. See, I'm doing you a favor by pulling you away from that green bird that, really doesn't matter. Now, if the bird was purple, if he was purple and black, we can fly with the purple and black. So for all of you, we're going to get into some serious conversation, but this is what we go through in our household. My husband is a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I am from Baltimore, and so I am Baltimore down. Okay, I am Ravens all the way. All right, good times through the good and the bad. I'm not going to talk about the Philadelphia fans because y'all only fans when y'all are fair weather fans. It don't matter. It can be a dirty bird, but it's a winning bird. So this is what we go through in the Weathers household. Just to Well, send them prayers up because they need it right about now. Mind the mental. So I wanted to talk about, one of the things that made me think about this topic of minding the mental while fighting the power is that it's something that we as a people have had to do for as long as for centuries, right here in this country. Even when you think about when we go back to the civil rights movement of the 60s, and even though I was born toward the end of the 60s, so what my memory of what happened is just kind of what I've learned in history, what I've seen in documentaries and things like that. But one of the things that I remember vividly is the way that they would prepare for having to go to endure the different fights that they knew they were going to have to fight. And so they didn't just kind of jump up and do a sit-in. They actually trained and had people spitting on their faces and throwing things at them and punching them at practicing what they knew would happen when they protested and when they staged these uprisings to gain the just the rights and the respect that we should have just as human beings, that they would be humiliated. And so thinking about having to go through that first, having to go through training by having your own people kind of beat up on you intentionally, preparing you for getting beat up by what was many of white society at that time, the violence that they put on people of color. That's a lot of trauma, to have to sort of um think through just to gain rights that should have been yours to begin with, right? That so what in your perspective, what do you think um what comes to your mind when you think about minding the mental as we fight the power? Because we know that the power struggle didn't end in the 60s. Um, every generation has to fight some kind of power, and as of late, many of our the Voting Rights Act has been rolled back. Many of the civil rights gains that were made back in the 50s and the 60s are now have been rolled back. And now our generation and our children are having to fight the same power, are having a lot of the same struggles. And in particular, I think for our children's generation that grew up, they grew up going to school with white kids. They grew up in multicultural kinds of settings, and, not necessarily having to endure the same level of in your face kind of racism that maybe our generation and certainly our parents' generation had and grandparents' generation had to deal with. And so for them having to sort of suddenly come face to face now with the kind of racism that we thought, or that many maybe thought was kind of over and done with because hey, we elected a black president, is is not the case, right? Because Jim Crow's grandbabies and great grandbabies are still there, and they're still fighting that same battle. They still fighting the Civil War and still wanting to roll us all the way back to slavery. And for many of our young people, it takes quite a bit of a mental toll on them. So how can you speak to that, to just ways to mind the mental as we are still having to fight for our basic rights? I'm sorry. Give me I'm sorry. It sounds like you can't be heard on Facebook. Make sure your Zoom mic is open, but your speaker on your computer is off. That's muted. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, turn no make yeah, we don't want to mute your Zoom mic. We need your Zoom mic open. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you All right, can y'all hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Got you now.
Okay, you say I see you say you had an echo. That's why. So no, as I was saying earlier, I'm not I train in martial arts, so I'm not a martial artist. I'm a student of the art, and I segue with something that's going to sound so far outreach that I want to bring it home. Is that the one thing that they train us is that, from Taekwondo and now definitely the intensity of Tiger Schumann's mixed martial arts, free shout out to them on Monumental, is that most of the intense battle that they train us in regards to studying the art is not just the physical, it's the mental. And so they really stress that you can have the physical capability to execute, punch, defend yourself, but if you're not winning it in your mind, then all the other practical training that you have amounts to nothing. And
Mm,
so to prepare to segue that into the narrative and the question that you're asking, as well as many battles that I've been in regards to social justice, some successful, some not as successful, it is definitely a mental battle from beginning to end. It's a mental battle. You can march, you can strategize, etc. But there's a system, and also I'll take it from another perspective. It's spiritual warfare, also.
mm,
And so when you're in battle, both mentally and spiritually, you have to understand, or not, you have to understand one who engages in this, and I've learned by trial and error, is that if you don't understand the essence of the how working on social justice is both mental, physical, and spiritual, you'll find yourself discouraged, you'll find yourself depressed, you'll find yourself not being effective, questioning, is this the cause that you really called me into? And then getting angry at God
mm.
because you called me into this fight and I'm fighting it, and the outcome is not coming in the manner that I thought it would. And then you start to get mad with God, like, I ain't asked for this. Why would you take me into this battle that it
Yeah.
looks like I'm gonna lose? And I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but the first social justice initiative I got involved with when we in the early stages of our marriage dealt with the house that we bought in North Carolina.
Yes.
And it was it was an intense battle,
Mhm.
studying, the tactics of the government, you know, studying the specs in which the organization is supposed to carry out according to HUD and community block grant, et cetera. So you had to learn as quick as the incidents were occurring. And then when it looked like we had the person's back up against the wall, he pulled the judo flip and ended up selling the property to a developer. And praise be to God, I mean, a senior citizen home got built, but I felt just exhausted. I was, literally broke down and cried because I wanted to topple the injustice someone of our own color was doing, top the injustice and really just collapse the whole organization. And I
Mhm.
remember you saying to me that you were called by God to fight this battle, but then you made this battle about you and you
Mm.
took your focus off of God who called you to fight the battle. And then so you went on the crusade to try to destroy the organization when God called you to fight for justice. And I
Yeah.
share that to say that was an eye opener for me, because when you are engaging in social justice, you have to be mindful of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual, and understand that you can lead to a certain point, but there's a time where you have to just accept the outcome, even if the outcome does not go the way you thought it would go. But at least you was willing to engage in the battle to render justice for those who are in need of it.
Absolutely. I was also just thinking about, you know, how can we, mentally train, our people to understand the importance of staying in the fight. There's a couple of different ways to look at the some of the mental anguish that occurs as a result of some of the sort of racial strife that we find ourselves in. One is you people become sort of apathetic, and they decide, I'm not going to vote, for example. I'm not going to vote because my vote doesn't matter. My vote, it doesn't, whether I vote or not, my interests are not going to be taken care of. Whether it's no matter what party is in office, our needs are still going to be largely unmet. So what is the point? How do you speak to that?
Wow,
'Cause
that's
that's a
multi.
mindset.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Mhm.
multi. So I would start with, how does a person get to that position where they say that their
Mm.
vote doesn't matter? That's the starting point. Unfortunately, to an extent, you have to blame the politicians campaign managers, et cetera, especially for people of color, because they set the narrative and set the stage and the mental oppression from both parties, you know,
Mm,
Democrat and Republican. I don't include independent. I mean, maybe that's wrong. I don't include independent because their power base isn't as strong as the Democrats and a Republican, and I'm a registered Democrat. But what I've witnessed in this area is that when you have politicians, right, that only show up, can I
mm,
just get a little honest? Maybe
yeah,
it might be a little bit too descriptive
get
as a past.
honest.
Um, Politicians treat their constituents like a one night stand.
Mm,
Call it for what it is. They treat them like a one night stand.
right.
Uh, if I can engage with you for one night and get what I can get, then I'm done with you after I get it.
Mm,
And maybe that's too descriptive, and I apologize if that's offensive, but I've often said it in my private circles and everything that that's what happened, and I've witnessed it. You know, and when I say witness it, let me make this clear. As a metaphor, I witnessed it as a metaphor. Let me make that clear. I witnessed it as a metaphor because I don't want somebody like, "Ooh, did you hear that, pastor?" And then you got about 1 million views on Facebook and Instagram. I need to make that clear. I witness it as a metaphor. But all jokes aside, it's like, so now you get your hopes up. You know what I mean? Like when I was working the Biden Harris campaign in Pennsylvania 2020, there was a gentleman who I don't want to mention his name because he worked for the campaign. I don't think he minded because he educated me on something. So his name was Abu Edwards. Abu Edwards and I, we're still, we're cool to this day. He's a millennial he's early or mid 30s. And I remember him saying to me, because I was the deputy coalition director for faith engagement in Pennsylvania for the Biden Harris campaign. And he
mhm,
was the deputy coalition director for Black male engagement. And so I remember him saying to me that there was a certain amount of young adults, 30 and 30 and under voting for Trump. And I said, "What? Voting for Trump?" I said, "Are they crazy voting for Trump?" He says, and he was adamant. He was like, Pastor Weathers, he said, "Let me break this thing down to you." He was like, there was a lot of folks. No, let me give two conversations while I'm co-mingling. One from my barber, but let me go with Abu. So Abu was like, the reason why they are voting for Trump is because nobody reaches out to him. No, they basically they treat them like they're nothing. And so
mhm,
here this Trump comes in to the hood that none of the other politicians are coming into, and he's voting for him. So here
mhm,
it is. You got folks to feel like my vote doesn't matter because nobody's
right.
willing to take the time to earn the vote. And so they put people in office, and the people that they put in offices give blanket promises. And then when they get in office, they don't fulfill the promise that it is that they say that they're going to fulfill. And so then
Mhm,
after a while, it's like, why do I keep engaging in the process when the process is failing me? That's part one. Part two of this answer, hope not being long with it. My barber, Sean Scrap, we call him Scrap Sean, one of the best barbers in South Jersey. I remember during the election, and he said this was Hillary Clinton. The first election I was talking about was 2020. Let me slow down, I'm getting a little animated. This election was 2016. And I remember my barber saying to me, "Yo, Rev, I think Trump gonna win." And I said, "There's no way Trump is going to win." I said, "There's no way." This is 2016. He says, "Rev," he was like, "I got folks coming in the barbershop saying that they're not going to vote." I says, "Why is it that they're not going to vote?" I said, "This is crazy. Do they understand the magnitude of not voting?" This is why I tell this narrative. He says to me, "Rev," he said, "Here's the problem. Folks got excited and voted for Obama for the first time." He said they voted for Obama for the first time. 2008 and 2012. He said, here's the problem. And this isn't a shot against Obama. He says, when Obama got in office, this is how they feel. He said there was a lot of promises that was made, but the promises that was made went to the rich folks. But people
mhm,
in the hood did not benefit from the policies of President Obama. And I said, policies, I said, yo, he passed, the bank reform, this, that, so on and so forth. He says, Rev, those policies didn't hit the hood. He says, so now the folks that got excited to vote for Obama for the first time in 2008, at the end of his term, they felt like their vote was wasted because there was no impact. They're still in
mhm,
the same situation that they were 8 years ago. As a result, they're disenchanted, don't want to vote. Finally, Jazz, when Stacey Abrams was running for a second term, I tell the story a lot when I was in Atlanta. And I said to our oldest daughter, I said, you gonna vote? She said, most definitely I'm gonna vote, Dad. She was like, but many of my generation is not gonna vote. And I was like, are you crazy? Are they crazy? Do they understand the magnitude? They gotta go out and vote, especially for Stacey Abrams. She says, Dad, she says, I'm gonna be very candid with you. My generation, when they see Democrats, the only thing they see is Republican in blue suits.
Mm,
I'll never forget that. She says they see
yeah,
Republicans in blue suits. So that one simple question that you asked that brought this
yeah.
long narrative about not voting is because what politicians don't understand, either they do it intentionally or unintentionally, is that they create a mental block for many of its constituents because you come in promising to be for the average individual. But what I've come to learn with a vast amount of politicians is that they're not really interested in the people, they're interested in the position. And
Mm,
once they position, the people don't matter until
right.
it's time to get reemployed, either after 2 years, 4 years, or 6 years. So they sell a good job at saying that they're for the people, but they're
Mm.
really seeking the position. Because when they get in office, that's all they do is they function from the perspective of the position and not the people.
So when we think about this this holiday, and the reason that it's important for us to talk about voting, I think one of the drawbacks is that we wait until, so we have an election coming up this year, and
Mm-hmm.
yes, it's in November of this year, but it is this year. But we wait until August, September to try to start telling people, make sure you vote. Um, we don't really bolster voting in our local elections that happen more than just every we have elections, every 2 years.
Every year.
Every year there's some kind of election somewhere going on. And the importance of making sure that you're registered to vote in your area and that you do participate in the process, because a lot of the things that we're seeing that's sort of making its way nationally started locally. And so it's important to, because the local elections are the ones that have the most impact on you, on where you live
Right.
now, and where you live as a citizen. So, and the reason that I think it's important for us to have this conversation specifically on Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, is that, as you mentioned a lot, and I want you to talk about this, you talk a lot about how this holiday has kind of been usurped, and people on the holiday focus so much on doing community service, as you say, going out painting a wall or picking up trash. But Dr. King was concerned about social justice. Dr.
Right.
King was concerned about the lives of individuals, and he was concerned about systems that have been put in place specifically to disenfranchise certain groups of people. So I really wanted to kind of get into that conversation tonight, on his birthday, because I just think that it's important for us to, as a people, to be aware. Dr. Edna says school board. Don't forget school board elections. Yes, because a lot is happening. People have just taken over these school boards, and so now you're getting books banned that shouldn't be banned. You're getting curricula taken out that shouldn't be taken out. You're getting people trying to whitewash our history, and trying to make it such so that the next generation is illiterate about the truth of our history in this country.
Right.
So, but just going back to just talking about what this day should be about. What do you think that this Martin Luther King Reverend, and that's something else you always let's not forget, he was Reverend Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King Jr. What do you think feel like this holiday really should be about for us?
Wow, that's a great question. Um, and only reason I take a pause because I get animated at this. I just want to take a deep breath and be able to articulate myself and pace what it is I'm getting ready to say. This is a day of not a day on or a day off. This is not a day about volunteerism. This is a day about social justice, period. And somehow, America has hijacked the narrative of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I just got to give myself a self shout out on WWDB 860 AM Thursday at 1 p.m. We're talking about how what was that? We're talking about how to stop his dream from becoming a myth. The legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. This is a radio series that we're doing on WWDB 860 AM, 1 p.m. on Thursday. Now going back,
Conversation unplugged.
Conversation Unplugged. I forgot my own
Tap
radio.
in.
Yeah, Conversation Unplugged. So it's a day of social justice, and so as it's a day of social justice, we should be evaluating the unjust actions, not only in America, but globally. You got me? And how are we going to strategize and deal with the systemic aspects of racism, oppression, sexism, etc., in order to bring about a social change to help transform the lives of our brothers and sisters. I believe if Dr. King was alive today, he would definitely have a prophetic voice in regards to the Israel Gaza war.
Mhm.
And I know that's a red herring because what I'm getting ready to say could be borderline, could be assumed or villainized as anti-Semitic, which is not. One, I do believe Israel have a right to defend itself. And you and I, we talked about this, babe. The problem is when the bombing first happened, not bombing, when the attack first happened against Israel, when Hamas attacked Israel and everything, the first thing I said while everybody was getting into the villainization of Hamas, maybe right, maybe wrong, I said, first thing I said is in Israel's intelligence. How in the world can Hamas be able to attack Israel and the intelligence did not pick up that this attack is getting ready to occur? So now a
Yes.
big war happened. 1,500 lives was lost on the Israeli side. Now you got 25,000 lives lost, communities that's decimated, babies that's being affected by the bombing, where you see them losing limbs, and nobody's taking. And now a ceasefire is rejected. And my Bible tells me where Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." And so here it is. You got this escalating of the war that's going on over and over again. And nobody's holding, Netanyahu's government accountable for the intelligence failure that could have prevented 1,500 lives from being lost, that could have prevented 50 individuals who are prisoners of war, captive, or held hostage, could have prevented 25,000 lives from being killed on the Gaza side. There's so many things that could have been done to prevent this particular situation from occurring. You got me?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, all that being said, I believe Dr. King not only would deal with the racism from the alt-right and the Trumpism that's going on, but also I do believe that he would discuss the gun violence that is happening in our own communities.
Mhm.
Not only the gun violence where easy access to guns, but how we're taking bullets and during Dr. King's day, your parents' day, my parents' days, that's our parents, excuse me, our parents' days and everything, you know, they had to worry about racist white individuals trying to take their lives, rather lynching, etc. Had the concern, especially, my dad and his siblings growing up in the South. Remember South Carolina and everything, the segregation, the Klan, etc. Not saying they faced
Mhm.
the Klan or anything like that, but yeah, segregation, the Klan, etc. That was their concern, right?
Right.
But now we have a generation that is doing the job that the Klan wanted to do.
Right.
And
Yeah.
not, it's not, it went from them torturing us to killing us to now self-annihilation, where the guns is being pumped in our communities purposefully so that we can take them and kill each other or kill innocent bystanders with black brown skin.
Right.
And so when we deal with that, or Dr. King would definitely lend his voice to the injustice of $500,000 homes that's being built, that's either condos or townhomes, especially in Philadelphia. And then right across the street, you got homeless people who can't find a home or a place to stay or a bed to lay in, but yet you got 500, 600, $700,000 homes that's being built. And in addition to that, those who get those homes, they get tax abatement. For those who don't know what that is, tax abatement is they don't pay the maximum amount of property tax on that property for 10 years. So you take a
Mhm.
$500,000 home, right, where property tax could be over 20,000, 30,000 a year. That's just an estimate. I could be wrong, give or take a few, but yet their property tax is only at $1,000 because they get a 10-year tax abatement. And what we've been hearing in Philadelphia now is that they get those homes for 10 years. By 8 years, they sell that home and then go into another tax abatement home. So then they can basically get, I would call, welfare in regards to avoiding paying the maximum amount of taxes, which is unjust because then you get a person who's been in their home for 20 and 30 years, they got to pay maximum amount for their property taxes. But if you buy $500,000, $600,000 home in certain sections of Philadelphia, you get a 10-year tax abatement.
Right, and then those homes cause the taxes to go up in those communities, and so then people are taxed out of their homes,
And
out of
then
their communities, and others are moved in.
And then
Um,
another, I'm sorry, then another aspect of that is, sorry, I got to hit this. Another aspect of that is as well, then it affects the funding for schools because the
yes.
500, $600,000 homes, right, that pay
Mhm.
minimum taxes, that means that that's not money going to public school system, which now
Right.
creates deficit, which now creates cutting of programs, which now says you got to keep lobbying the state capitol for more money that they don't want to give out because in the western part of Pennsylvania, they look down on the area of Philadelphia. So
Right.
there's so many dynamics here. You ask one simple question, and I gave you a whole dissertation of an answer.
I know, but it's important because, for us to understand that those are the kinds of issues that Dr. King would have been fighting for, I believe. Um,
Hmm.
he wouldn't have it wasn't just about going around and doing doing activities to show that we care for our community. Um, it really is about it really is about much more than that. And it's important that we think about the mindset of new generations that are coming up, and that we all right, I'm sorry, y'all. My we are we we're, we are making brownies.
And I was probably related to Dr. King. I like to bake. So there's this book that my wife and I got when we took the kids to Atlanta for the first time, and it's called Sweet Auburn Avenue Recipes. And it was bought out of the Dr. King bookstore. And so, as an honor to Dr. King as well, I normally bake something or you bake something, etc. And because we went to visit a member who was in a hospital, I was like, I'm not letting this day go. We didn't have our Dr. King meal that we normally, Dr. King had nothing to do with it. That's what we call it, our Dr. King meal. I was determined that I was going to bake something from that uh from that recipe book. And I wasn't going to burn it because, you're not a goddess from the Old Testament. So I wasn't going to make no sacrificial offerings or anything like that. So that's how all that came in. So
All
I had to
right.
take I burned the brownies. All right, that ain't had nothing to do with social justice. But now let's get.
All right, let's get back to minding the middle. So, but the reason that I think it's important to discuss a topic like this on Mind the Mental Monday is that it really is a mindset that will allow us to educate our people about the importance of pumping the importance of voting in every election, not just around election time, but every day. Even starting when I was a little girl, I would go in the voting booth with my mother. My mother would take me to vote with her. And
Mhm.
so I learned from a very, very young age, the importance of making your vote a priority. I learned about our ancestors who died, who literally were killed so that we could have that right. And so for us to just sort of reduce Martin Luther King's birthday to a day of just going out and we don't knock that. We don't knock, going out and picking up trash and all that kind of stuff. But those are things that we should be doing anyway, right? But on Martin Luther King's birthday, that should be a day that we come together and strategize about how to move forward. And we know that we are not a monolithic people, as no people are monolithic, right? We have our own a diversity of ways that we think, a diversity of ways that we might decide to do things. And even in Dr. King's day, people had a diversity of opinions about how we should move forward as a people, but everybody agreed that we need to move forward as a people, right? And everybody did their part in that forward movement. And I just think it's important for us to in this generation to still be talking about this, because now what we see is that a lot of the, like I said earlier, a lot of the social justice um, campaigns and rights that were gained in the civil rights movement have been rolled back because we went to sleep.
Yeah.
We got to a place where we could go to any store we want to go to, or we could eat at any restaurant we want to eat at. We could go to any school that we want to go to, and we got a black president, and now we've arrived, and we haven't. And so it, it we, that's what happens when we go to sleep. And this is why you have people that are, now that they've successfully rolled back a lot of the civil rights gains. Now the next step is, now we need to stop educating you. Now we need to not teach history in schools. We need to remove. We need to just erase people. We need to just take out all the books that have a black person on the cover. We just need to just sort of go back to the 50s and 60s, where on TV you didn't see, the only time you saw people that looked like us were in subservient kinds of roles, except for until you got to Julia, right? Um, and so, we have to be cognizant of it. Not only do we need to be cognizant, not only do we need to be mentally awake and understand, um, what is really happening, and be abreast of what's happening. We need to be able to teach our children. We need to be able to teach them, the mindset that they need to have to fight the power. Because as much as we would like for all of these battles to already be won and be a one and done and be over with, the fact of the matter is that they're not. In every generation, something creeps up that tries to pull us backwards. And so we have to make sure that we educate our own children. We can't depend on the public school system. My parents didn't depend on the public school system to educate us about our history. We sat around the dining room table and were taught our history, to a point where, there were times when, I almost got in trouble in school because, I would speak the truth. And we weren't learning the truth. They were still trying to teach us stuff like, Columbus discovered America, that kind of craziness, right? Which never made sense. If you just even think about that, it doesn't make sense. But um, I was taught at home. So we have to also make sure that first of all, we educate our own selves and read and make sure we get to know our own history, so that we are equipped to then educate our children in
So
generations to come.
so there was a lot to, and it was great, that I wanted to unpack, especially about the whole concept of sleeping. So there's so many layers of mental drug inducement, if that
Mm,
makes any sense. Not even from a physical perspective, meaning what we take in our mouths. So from a church perspective, there was a movement, this is research done around the 80s, where folks like Jerry Falwell was very successful in shifting Black church thinking from civil rights to salvation.
mm,
As long as you get the soul saved,
mm,
that's the only thing that matters. So
mm.
somewhere along the line, we stop pushing liberation theology, right? Where we see God through the
Let me
lens
press.
of being the liberator of our freedom, right? And so
Mhm,
then we shifted from a liberation theological perspective to an ideological perspective cloaked in theology.
mm,
And let me explain what I mean by that. Salvation is theological. Saving
mhm,
souls is theological. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But you can't do salvation without liberation, period.
mm.
Because after that soul gets saved, we have to work on liberating them both mentally, physically, and spiritually. That's
Right,
why if there was no need for spiritual liberation, and Paul would have never wrote, put on the whole armor of God.
right. Mhm,
Yeah. So in that aspect, that's where they put us to sleep as well. The second aspect is with COINTELPRO, civil rights movement, Black Power movement, institutional government basically set up plans to either put us against each other. That's how the Black Panther Party started to diminish, or they killed our prophets, period.
right.
And so the next phase of that is, and then they started to pump our communities either with guns, heroin, crack, marijuana to put us to sleep. Even now with our young kids, this younger generation, the
Mhm,
skunk weed, that's what I call it, the skunk
mhm,
weed that is marketed global. You got me?
right.
Wherever you go from Philadelphia to New York, when we went to Harlem when you was doing a workshop at Pastor
Mhm,
Scott's church, and I was allowed to preach that Sunday, not reflective of the church, but where we were going, the skunk weed. And I remember
mhm,
saying to you that same smell of skunk weed that I smell in Philadelphia, I smell it in New York, I smell it in Baltimore. When we go down south, we smell it down
mhm,
south. They've been able to market that skunk weed, making you think that it's cool. And I'll be very candid with you, and using hip hop artists to promote the smoking of weed, right? As
mhm,
it's cool. Some of it may be fine medically, according to them, but you are creating an image for our generation that's putting them to sleep while others are working to dismantle the movement. And then finally,
right,
now Hollywood, as they putting us to sleep, now they're creating shows to make it come across that slavery wasn't that bad. That
right.
in this time you can have a black cowboy with a bunch of Caucasian brothers and sisters, and that there's no repercussion. No, we know for a
Mm-mm,
fact that that's a bold-faced lie. So there's a multifaceted way that they're trying to comatose us, right? To,
mhm,
how can you say, mentally, symbolically drug induce our minds to
mm,
think one way so they can dismantle what it is that Dr. King and others were able to build for us. It just doesn't make, I'm just so animated about it. They are systematically, mentally pumping stuff in us so that they can dismantle what it is that Dr. King gave up his life for us to have. And one extra thing, what they've also done is they've used folks to promote this poison of alt-right conservatism to a generation that don't know the history. And so now you have an alt-right group of African Americans now that's 30 and under that's biting that apple, believing that this stuff is solid gold truth.
right.
So I know I just gave a
Yeah.
multifaceted.
I think the important thing is to understand that, people can't pump in us what we don't receive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just the education piece is very important because we it's kind of like, people saying like Flip Wilson used to say the devil made me do it. Well,
Yep.
the devil can't make you do anything. Do what you don't want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's your choice. You made a choice to do that. And so we have to understand the importance of staying sober, um, so that we can dismantle systems that have been put in place, um, to, to miseducate us, and to cause us to sometimes even view our own selves as second class citizens. Um, we have to understand and see ourselves as I talked about last week, the lens that we look through. It can't be the lens of, what America has put on us, after we got here. It has to be through the lens of who God created us to be,
Hmm.
um, which is a great people with, um, who are creative and intelligent and who came up with, you know, concepts like mathematics and some mathematical concepts and scientific concepts that are used all over the world now. And so, we have to constantly educate ourselves and educate our children, because if we depend on others to do it, there if we allow others to create the narrative, then that narrative is the one that's going to go forward. So not only are we responsible for our own narrative, but we're also responsible for writing our own narrative so that it goes down in history, for our children and their children to read and learn, the truth.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, no, it's so critical that you make that statement as we deal with social justice and as we deal with social justice and the impact mentally and everything. You and I, we talked about this journey that I'm on, especially as an activist. As you were talking, how do you see yourself? Forget which book I'm reading that I got this from, but the question, who do you want to be? you know
Mhm,
and there's four lists for me, and my list would be totally different than somebody else's. I've learned how to write my own vision statement. So with my war with depression and everything, when I feel myself shrinking to minimalization,
mhm,
between the narratives or false narratives that was placed on me that I chose to believe, which wasn't the narrative God wanted me to live, I go back to my vision statement. This is who
mhm,
I am, pastor, husband, husband, father, teacher, pastor, entrepreneur, etc. I go back to reaffirming myself. And all that being said, not to make this about me, as I get ready to close out, or we get ready to close out, we can't rely on politicians and government and political parties, etc., to get us motivated, pumped up to go to the polls and vote. No, we have to be the vehicles of our encouragement to get our
mhm,
folks to go out. We have to be the ones. And let me say we, let me put some specifics there, because I'm a Christian, right? And because I believe in the power of the African American church, we used to pump out the information. We used to motivate our communities. We used to be in tune to our communities and not
mhm,
detached. We can't buy into this, oh, we just got to save the soul. This is not a place for the church. That's a bold faced lie. We got to be the ones that be the instrument, because if Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the churches did not get together in the Montgomery Improvement Association, there would not have been the death of segregation. There would not have been the doors of integration opening up. What most people fail to realize is even some of our own folks who get so caught up into their false narrative of theology of God's word and singing, you know what I mean, is that what we must understand is that the prophetic movement that allowed the walls of segregation to come down, that's trying to come back up, was done through the vehicle of the African American church. Period.
absolutely,
Period.
absolutely, um, absolutely. The all if you look back at all of the previous, during the civil rights movement, it was always the African American church at the forefront, of many of the policies and things that we were able to successfully change, um, toward forward movement, of us as a people. Um, and it was the God we serve
That's
that
right.
was the one that gave us the power to do so.
Mm-hmm. I
So,
think. I think from a non-Christian, I know we get close from a non-Christian perspective. I will say this also: they didn't do much with it after the fact, but one of the powerful effects of the Million Man March was that when that Million Man March occurred, they were registering people to vote. And it was an
Yes.
astronomical amount of African American men, to be exact, that was registered to vote at the Million Man March. Because your dad, myself, brothers, we were at the Million Man March, and they were registering people to vote in Washington, D.C. Somehow along the line, we've gotten away as African American church and congregation, we've gotten away from the plight in the fight for social justice. Maybe that might be wrong to say all. Let me just say some aspects of the African American church, not all. We've gotten away from the plight in the fight for social justice.
We got to get back on track because we're looking at who's comprises the majority of the Supreme Court, and we look at just all of the hard work that's being sort of rolled back. We've got work to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that said, thank you, hubby, for. I see. I knew that's why I got you, because I knew
Like I
it
said,
was going to be
I
a good, robust conversation.
I gotta love you because I sacrificed God's chosen bird for 60 minutes
Anyway, that wasn't no
of
sacrifice.
the interview to have this interview. God's chosen.
No sacrifice at all.
Yes,
So thank you everybody for tuning in to Mind the Mental Monday. I know it's a little bit different than what you're used to from Mind the Mental Monday, but it's necessary because social justice is important
it
um,
is.
from a mental health aspect, especially when it concerns our people.
Reverend
So
Weathers, Reverend Weathers, if I could just say this closing out in really just 10 seconds. When it comes to social justice and minding your mental health, please understand when you fight for social justice, it's not a sprint. It has to be a marathon. And if you don't prepare your mind for the marathon and you think it's going to be a sprint or a microwave, that's when you're going to go into mental suppression and depression.
absolutely. So we got to get our minds right, y'all, so that we can move forward individually and as a people. So thank you, Reverend Dr. Weathers, for such a robust conversation. Thank you all for tuning in. Um, join me right here next Monday on Mind the Mental Monday, and we'll resume what you're used to from from Mind the Mental Monday. Uh, please also tune in to Conversation Unplugged.
Thank you.
That's Reverend Weathers, Dr. Weathers' radio show, Thursdays, 1 o'clock p.m. on WWDBAM. You can look at it on his Facebook page. I'm sorry, what did I say? You said
8:60 a.m.
8:60 a.m. Sorry about that. 8:60 a.m. Uh, both Reverend Dr. Weathers and I are both life coaches as well. If you are looking for a life coach, for me, I focus on people who are looking to who might feel unfulfilled. People over the age of 45 feeling unfulfilled, wanting to just retool, refuel, renew, reimagine your life in a more fulfilled way. Reach out to me. Dr. Weathers is the owner and operator of Bound for Greatness. And you want to tell them about your focus, your coaching focus?
Sure. Bound for Greatness is my consulting business, Bound for Greatness LLC. The three principal focuses on coaching, consulting, and communication. I provide life coach to those who are entrepreneurs seeking to open up their own business, those who are, you know, um, political activists looking for campaign strategies, how to campaign, how to develop campaigns and reach a larger audience. Or if you're just looking for the basic type of coaching, you are stuck in a mental rut and you're trying to develop a pathway to reach a potential goal or objective, please get in contact with me. That's Bound for Greatness LLC. That's one aspect of what I do is coaching.
Very good. If you need an editor, if you're writing a book or dissertation, I'm your girl. Reach
Yeah.
out. All right. Well, blessings to everybody. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.